Tonight you will see our Continental tour on a shoestring, which took place during the month of May, 1958. You will visit such famous cities as Paris, and Rome, and Amsterdam. You will share with us moments never to be forgotten. And now, if everyone's ready, we'll begin.
This is the first morning of our trip. We stayed outside a small town by the name of Beauvais, France. We've eaten breakfast now. It's about 6 o'clock. And when Nani saw the car, she was so excited you could almost see her hair change colors. This is the rear view of our Tommy, the Taunus. It serves as a nice table for a picnic. We slept in it all through the continent. We stayed in a hotel only one night. And there's plenty of room in there, except I had to stick my feet out the rear end once or twice.
These are my two honeys. Can't you just see how proud Bert is of this car? Of course, we both are. This is a railroad bridge and some cows just outside of the town of Beauvais. Just look at that lush grass.
I hope we aren't rushing you too fast with these pictures. This is the way they grow trees in France. I guess they sharpen them at the bottom and drive them in the ground. We're in Paris now. We saw a funeral procession going down one of the main streets, so we had to circle one of the blocks and come around to get ahead of it so we could take a picture of it. It's quite an act.
Now this is just a little bit closer view of this funeral procession. You see all the people walking in the back. Well, they're the mourners, of course, and they have one of the women, I believe, has a black veil over her face. And you see all the cars behind following. Well, of course, you can't pass around a funeral procession. But it was quite interesting. We'd seen of processions in New Orleans, and this is a lot like it, I think.
This is one of the modern freeways in France. There aren't too many like this. This runs from Paris, the center of Paris, to toward the north. We used it to go up to the Army and Navy PX, which is about 6 miles out of the center of Paris. And there's no speed limits in France, of course, so we really found out what the Taunus could do.
This one needs no introduction, I think. Of course, it's the Eiffel Tower. And you really don't realize how big it is until you get right down to it. And you'll see this in the next picture.
Now, you'll notice in this that there are 3 levels. Just above the top of the trees, there's one about 1/4 way up and at the very top. Now, while we were there, we went to the one just at the bottom. That's not the base of the tower, that's just the first level up. And the pictures that we took are taken from that level just above the top of the trees, so you'll be able to imagine how high it would appear from the very top.
Yes, that's me.
That's the very base of one of the legs. You can imagine the size of the whole thing.
Oh, my aching back.
Now this is sort of an international building looking to the north from the Eiffel Tower, and this is at the level that I mentioned. It's the lowest of the 3 levels.
And that's the River Seine at the bottom. You'll see a better view next time. There it is again, and you'll see one of the bridges of Paris, and this is looking over the north of the city, just to the right of the government building that we saw in the previous picture. It was a clear day and we had a real good view.
Now this is on the opposite side of the Eiffel Tower from the government building. It's one of the prettiest views from the tower, I think. Well, this of course needs no introduction either. It's the Arc de Triomphe.
And the wide street that you see, that we're on now, is the Champs-Élysées, which of course is one of the main routes in Paris.
This is at the famous roundabout in Paris, the Arc de Triomphe. If you get in this circle and get out again without any scratches, you're doing real good. We made it about 4 times and decided we better not try it again.
Quit while we're ahead.
They really drive crazy there, you know. They have no regard for speed or which side of the street or which direction they drive in.
And it's amazing how no one seems to ever hit you, or you never seem to hit anyone.
They always get out of your way. The looks like a band right there. They were having some sort of a military funeral at the center of the arc. As we came by there, we were stopped for traffic, and that's the only chance we got to get a picture of it.
Now this is my little bit of contribution. This was taken at the Palace at Versailles, and it shows just a little bit of the lawns that they had there. And all these lawns were beautifully shaped and carved into different shapes. The little bit of a lake that you see in the background is not part of the palace, I don't believe. It was across the road from the palace. However, all that in the foreground is the palace at Versailles.
This again is where we took the last picture from. This girl was pushing this hoop stick around, and I think it's about the first time we've seen it, so we had to get a picture of it.
You'll have to look closely, but if you do, you can see that the hoop is in the air. This, I think, is the most beautiful view from the balconies at the Palace of Versailles. It was out toward the back as we came in, and you see the fountain, and as far back as you can see, I believe, are the palace grounds. And you see on both sides, on right and left, more of the shaped gardens.
I believe that these gardens of Versailles are supposed to be quite famous. This is the palace itself. It was formerly built as a hunting lodge in 1641, I believe. And that's my honey.
Which one has the toning? This is just one of the many statues they had around this big pool right in the courtyard of the palace.
Now we're at Chartres. Is that right? Chartres?
Who knows?
It's a French word anyway. But this is the cathedral at Chartres. It's one of the most famous cathedrals in France. We didn't really get a good reproduction of the stained glass windows in there, but they had, I'd say about 6, which were similar to this, and each were different and each were really beautiful. This is just another of the stained glass windows.
And you just can't believe the beautiful colors that you get. It's just something that, well, I don't know even if you could get a good picture of it. It's just beyond words. This is a lady that was outside of this cathedral in Chartres, and she was selling all kinds of lace tablecloths and lace doilies of different kinds, hats I think she has, and aprons and all that, and she herself is dressed in a regional dress of some kind. Very colorful.
Now, if I can pronounce the words, this is the River Loire at Cloyes. It was quite unique, I thought. It was just coming out from under the house, and I thought it'd be a good way of disposing of dishwater and husbands and a few other things. This is the other side of the bridge, the same river. It's the prettier side too, I believe. This is, let's see, this is a town of Châteaudun, We stopped here to look at a castle. Well, we had a hard time finding the castle in the first place. When we got up there, we found that very few people were there. You couldn't get in, and it didn't look very interesting from there. But on the way back, we thought the town looked quite picturesque. And this is what many of the little French towns look like: very steep roofs and shutters, which you can't particularly see here, and usually a church steeple sticking out of the center. This is breakfast time again, just outside of Poitiers. We had, I think it was pancakes and bacon.
This is my picture. Bert didn't want me to take this, but I did anyway, and I don't know, I think it turned out all right. These are the double towers in the Cathedral of Saint Jean d'Angely. And, well, the picture speaks for itself. They have cathedrals and churches like this all over France, in fact, all over the continent.
This is a little river that ran right through the town of Santes. It was an interesting little town. They had music playing all through the town, coming out of loudspeakers. And we stopped there and got some hot French bread and butter, and boy, it was really delicious.
The greenery, you just can't really believe it unless you see it yourself. I hope we've given you a bit of an idea. This is the Rue Saint Catherine in Bordeaux, and now we're getting close to the Spanish border, and maybe you can see that arc in the background. It's a bit of a touch of Spain, I think. And this is just how narrow and dark the streets are in these towns. This is my house. I took 2 pictures of this house, and one of them just didn't turn out at all, so I'm glad I took 2. First of all, of course, the most feature that hits you first of all is the fact that there are trees growing up to support a balcony made of the same branches of those trees. This isn't the whole house, this is just part of it, as you can see, but off to the left there's more of it. And also you can tell now what I mean when I say that they have shutters in these houses, and they really do use them. You can even see that the doorway is shuttered all the way across it.
Well, this was just outside of Bordeaux. We stopped and had dinner at a outside cafe. It was the first one we had stopped at. We had steak and French beans. The French beans were the only thing that I really liked. We asked for the steak to be, they had 2 types, done and underdone. We wanted it fairly rare, so we asked for the underdone. And was it ever underdone? It was just about raw meat and warm on the edges, and that was about it.
This is wash day in Bayonne. Bayonne is still getting closer to Spain, and it was quite hot there, so this scene of washing was really welcome. You can see, if you use your imagination, women bending over the water, washing their clothes. You can see the clothes, a few of the clothes hanging up there on the left. Across the road was about 3 or 4 yards filled with wash lines, filled with clothes.
We have the name, this is the River Nieve in Bayonne, the same city. This is right next to the washstand. Bayonne, Biarritz, and 1 or 2 others are famous seacoast towns right on the Atlantic, just above the Spanish border. Still in Bayonne, this is the Chateau Vieux, or Vieux, or something like that.
Here again, I wanted to show you about the shutters, and you can see that all of these windows have shutters. And I think probably that even though this was a large house at the very, well, I don't know how long ago, but now it's probably several apartments. And
excuse me, it's called a chateau. Only a few houses in France, I believe, are able to be called chateaus. They're the older houses, and they used to be run by the richer people in the country. Now we're in Biarritz, another seacoast town, just above the Spanish border.
Look at the color of that water. And believe it or not, that's just what it was. Down to the right, you'll see some pen-looking things. Now, I don't know what those were, but they had boats in them. Perhaps they were private fishing grounds. When high tide came in, it'd bring the fish in, and they could catch them that way.
I think they were probably dry docks.
Dry docks, maybe.
A little darker picture, but this was Nani's picture. I'll let her tell you about it.
Well, it was just, I thought it looked like more a calendar picture than anything else, with a lone lighthouse out there, and this is still the Biarritz seacoast.
Talk about calendar pictures. That's Red sitting down there on a stone.
Now, forget that.
I'd have her in any calendar. Now, this is my picture. She doesn't see why I took it, but I thought it was real pretty. The water coming over the right edge of the rock there and making a lot of foam. Sticking out there all by itself in the water. Took this out of the car window after we'd passed through French customs and just before we'd gone through Spanish customs. This is the river dividing France from Spain.
You might call it the Rio Grande. But how about that lace down at the bottom of the picture? Actually, that was just the top of the railing at the sides of the bridge.
This is San Sebastian now. About, what was it, 3 or 4 times a year, they have a big market in anchovies. And we just happened to be there at the time that the boats were bringing a lot of men. They'd put them in these crates and salt them down and load them onto trucks and ship them out to main cities in Spain. We followed one truck out of town, and it was on the road to Madrid. And we were going to follow it to where they processed them and see what actually happened from there on. But we weren't quite ready to go to Madrid yet, so we didn't do that. Well, now this one's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see the bit of board angling on the right side of the picture. That's what the man on the left would dip these baskets into the pool of fish on the boat, hand it to the man in the middle. He'd slide it up to the man on the right, and he'd slide it on up to the docks, where they would carry it over to the crates and salt them down. It was quite an interesting process to watch. And people on the dock, old ladies and old men, would walk around picking up the anchovies that were dropped, putting them into a little basket to take home and eat. It was kind of a pitiful sight, actually. That's my honey. After we had stopped at this river a little further downstream, I went swimming because it was so hot. But there were other people there, and the Spanish don't like their ladies displayed, so she couldn't go in. So we stopped a little bit further up the stream, and she got out and waded around in the water too.
This is a bit of a waterfall on the road to Pamplona. And that's just about all there is to say about it. It was so hot that it was a welcome sight. We wish we could have stood under it. And this is another waterfall, just a bit bigger one. And it's still on the road to Pamplona. You can see down at the bottom that it's made for itself a natural bridge. Looks almost like a ring.
It was quite a pretty fall. We're in the Pyrenees Mountains now, and that's where the water is coming from. This is looking back from a summit in the Pyrenees Mountains. The farms are all on the side of hills like this. The houses all look pretty flimsy, but it's beautiful scenery.
And what huge mountains, all green it looks like, and not so jaggedy, but real thick and lots of them. This is the Spanish town of Berea in the Pyrenees. Now this town looks quite neat and tidy, which it was. Red roofs, of course, and the main highway going down right through the middle of town.
They had quite a bit of vegetation here because they were near the mountains. Things were quite green and looked quite clean. The rooftops in Spain are pretty much all like that, and the houses are nearly all white. As we got further away from the Pyrenees, though, the landscape changed quite a bit. Things got quite a bit drier, as you'll see.
Now this is a Spanish mountain village from a distance. I think I was sleeping, and as I woke up, Bert was going along this road that you see in front of us, all dirt and dust, and I looked out and I couldn't see anything out the back window because for the dust. And I wondered where he was going. Well, he said he thought he'd seen a castle or something up on the left there, which you see, and we found out that it was a church. Well, it was quite interesting. I'll let Bert tell you what happened when we got there.
Yes, well, we thought we would just might investigate one of the villages and see what they were like, the ones that were off the main road. It was a dirt road from there on, too. Every one of them except the main ones are dirt.
Well, when we drove up into the village, which was a rutty little road, all the little kiddies came running and running, and they probably wondered what we were. And then when they saw that there were people in this thing that they saw coming up toward them, they ran and ran and ran away from us to their mamas and papas. So all the mamas and papas came out, plus all the kids, all the little ones and the big ones, and out they came into this little courtyard, which seemed to be the center of town, just to see what the foreigners looked like. So what Bert did was to get out of the car. We still had to walk up to the church, but he wanted to get out of the car and go and ask one of the elders for permission to go up to the church. This he did, and permission was granted, so we left our car there in the little courtyard, and walked up from that group of buildings you see on the right up to the church on the left. As we got up toward the church, we looked back down into the village, and everyone was crowding around the car, but no one was touching it. I was wondering if we should have locked the car, but Bert said no, that these people are curious, but they certainly aren't mean. And this is what we saw when we got up to the church. This is the church's belfry, and we went inside the church, and I think I've told you in the diary all about it. I mean, their towns may be very poor and very simple, but the insides of their church are covered with gold. They're about as ornate as you can get, and beautiful. In back of this church there was the graveyard that had a wall of about 4 or 5 feet high all the way around it. Quite impressive.
We're in Pamplona now. This little park we spotted as we were driving through, and it was quite hot, so we wanted to get out and walk around a bit. All through the park they had gardens like this, all neatly shaped and beautifully decorated. This particular picture we wanted to take of the pink tree on the left. This is also in Pamplona. Nani was crazy about taking pictures of fountains all the way through the trip. Likewise, I guess I took about as many pictures of waterfalls.
Well, this is one of the adobe villages that you find outside medium-sized cities. Once you get off the beaten track, this is what you see. All of the houses, some have been whitewashed, but all of them are made out of what the dirt is, so they're the same color. There were people around. We didn't see many, but they were there. And that, I think the picture speaks for itself. That's just what Spain was like. One of the reasons we didn't want to go to Madrid. This is a bit dark, however, it's the same type of picture as the one before, about the adobe villages, and, oh, I don't know, you get a silhouette anyway. This is going along out of one of these adobe villages, getting back into the town. Most of the houses are whitewashed now, and they decorate their balconies with pots of flowers. Also, they decorate them with wash, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. Now, as we were going through one of the towns, I can't remember the name of it, but it was before we got to Zaragoza, we saw a little boy, the one you see on the far right, and we wanted to get a picture of this little boy.
No, the one on the far right is me.
Yes, dear. The one that you can see, though. So we wanted to get a picture of the little Nino. Well, he wouldn't come to us. Bert had one piece of gum, and he waved it at the little fellow, but he just wouldn't budge. So finally, the large old woman in the middle came along, and she said something about the beautiful Cocha, and we told her in so many words that we wanted a picture of the little boy. So apparently, with the word fotografia, she thought we wanted to take a picture of her. And so she started primping her hair, and she said something to the effect that, oh, I couldn't, I'm really not very presentable. However, she got up in line, and all the time she was calling everybody that she could see to come have their fotografia taken. And all the time we just wanted the little boy. So finally we did get it across to her that we wanted the little boy in the picture too. So Bert went over and took the gum to him, and that's the picture you see. Well, afterwards, Grandmother came up to us and she wanted the photograph. She said, you know, she wanted it, she thought we could give it to her right then, but we tried to explain to her that it wasn't ready yet. So off we went.
Now this is some ruins we saw off to the left of the road as we were on our way to Zaragoza. It stood out nicely with the background of clouds, but we don't know exactly what it meant or when it was ruined.
This was going to be my favorite picture of wild flowers. I don't know, you can get a bit of a glimpse of the red down there. And they were all wild poppies, beautifully colored. I wish I'd got them a bit brighter. But I had to walk about a quarter of a mile to get in the right direction to take them so that the sun would be behind me. They were pretty, though.
This is just some of the landscape now. We're, of course, we've been out of the Pyrenees for a while. We're getting back into them now. We're in Barcelona now. This is the Palacio Real. It's the palace for, I don't know, I guess the King of Spain. Just across the street, it was quite a wide highway going into Barcelona, was this Monumento a los Caídos. It was, that's all it said on it. We got lost about 1,700 times in Barcelona, and the majority of the time we were driving around through streets that looked just like this. We thought we'd take a picture of it. This was the next morning after we had slept out near the ocean, and by this time we were pretty fed up with the town and we left. But this is what most of the streets look like: narrow, high walls, and your front door right on the street. We're in France now. This is Narbonne, and this is the plage Narbonne, which means the beach. That's Red trying to show off her athletic abilities. Behind, you can see where they had been with a road grader pushing some of the sand down the beach a ways to extend the beach and make it all real nice. It was real peaceful there. They weren't in full swing yet, and we had the whole beach to ourselves.
Only once did we see anyone, and that was two boys walking from nowhere and going into nowhere, as far as we could discern. This is my He-Man holding up the world, I think. I wonder what he's standing on. Now, you can guess at this. Bert's showing me how to be graceful. Still at Narbonne. Still being graceful, but looking very cool. This is in the Mediterranean.
It was really nice. It was our first swim in the Mediterranean, and I think we started about 7:30 one morning, and the water was a bit cool, but the sun was nice and warm, and we spent the whole day right up until just about sundown in the water and on the beach. We sure felt sore afterwards, too. Now here comes our calendar picture. Notice the long hair. She's just had it trimmed quite a bit. It's not quite that long now.
Now those are the mattresses that we got from the English surplus, army surplus, through the one of the newspapers, and we used those to sleep on and to use in the water. This was in Nice, and also I wish this could have been a bit brighter, because I think it would have made a very good picture. This was an old woman sitting mending fishing nets, and the picture speaks for itself, I think. This was just about 50 yards from the old woman, and it was a shepherd dog sitting on a boat. If you look real carefully, you can see just under his paws the name Nice.
This is also in Nice. It's one of the harbors. As you can see, we had quite an overcast there. From this point on, we hit foggy and overcast weather pretty much of the way. But up until now, we hadn't seen so much sun since we've been over here. This, of course, is the entrance to the famous port of Monte Carlo. We came in on the little boat on the right there, of course. You could see the very low overcast at the top of the picture. And that's not trick photography either. There was a low overcast. All the many fishing boats in the harbor there, all the casinos and the large hotels. This is Monte Carlo still. Still in Monte Carlo, this is the palace. We didn't get to see Princess Grace or Prince Rene, but we did see the palace, and from there we took the pictures of the harbor.
This was just a bit closer view of the palace, and this is the front of it. You see the telephone boxes they look like outside the palace. And can you see whose car's on the left?
This is in Italy now. It's Imperia, Italy. Of course, you can see the sign on the highway is pointing to Genova. Nani took this, of course. It's another one of her fountains.
And we were on our way to Genova.
Now, we weren't really trying to get out of town in a hurry or anything. It's not the reason for the slanted picture, but I thought that was quite quite something to take a picture of.
Of course, this is something that you'd probably never see at home, ever.
This is just one of the Italian Riviera towns. We would, from the seacoast, we would drive up into the mountains and then back down into a town and back up into the mountains and back down into the town. It was quite laborious work driving through Italy until we got to Rome, and from then on it wasn't quite so bad. This is one of the highways in Rome. In Italy. They were quite nicely built. The bridge going across in the center of the picture is for the autostrade. We took the low road. That was the high road. It was a faster highway.
Just like a sleeping giant sprawling in the sun, in one great hand the Rio Grande, in the other Galveston.
Now this was at Livorno, which is right near Pisa. This is still on the Italian Riviera, and Bert's really taking advantage of it. In one hand he's got not the Rio Grande, but he's got a bottle of vino. Also you can see my sandals from Zaragoza, Spain. You can see our little radio, a pair of tennis shoes, and back in the back is our diary that we kept, plus all the other costs and all that.
We're still in Italy now. This is the way all the natives travel. Bicycle or motorbike, and all their girls are on the back riding side saddle. It's really quite funny. You can see them lined up for miles on a road like this on a Sunday or when everybody's out. This is just a picture of the Mediterranean, and it's really that blue. It's really beautiful.
Notice our pink cloud.
Yeah, that was hard to do. Ah, great Rome. This is the, what do they call it?
It's a memorial
Yeah,
to
memorial.
Emmanuel II.
And also in the center is the statue of the unknown soldier.
Of Italy's unknown soldier.
Italy's unknown soldier. And we're going over a map to see just exactly what we want to see first and where. And believe me, Rome was really a picture taker's paradise. They had just about everywhere you wanted to go.
Now this was inside the Colosseum. Now you can tell that it's quite old. I mean, it was really something for me, especially, I think. And you want to just sit and close your eyes and pretend that everything was as it was back in those days. Now we're down in the very pit of the Colosseum. Now, of course, in the old days, they had a floor above that, which concealed all these pens and passageways underneath the floor. That's where they kept prisoners and animals and all that. And up above, of course, they had the seats where the citizens sat. This is the Arch of the Constantine, and this is just outside the Colosseum.
This is the Colosseum. It's taken from the Antiquarium, Florence. This is the picture that you usually see on all the postcards, I think. Now this is the original Roman Forum. Of course, each bit of the Forum there had its own famous use. Off to the left, the very small white pillars were what was it?
It was the Temple of the Vestal Virgins.
That's right. And right at the base of it, to the left, is the tomb of Julius Caesar. And, of course, every bit of the pedestals and everything that is broken off were statues and busts and that. If you look in the book that we sent with the diary, you'll find the description of every part of this.
This is just another view of the Roman Forum, and you can see an arch in the back, and we didn't get the name of this down, or did we?
No, we don't have the name of it. It's in that book.
It's in the book that we sent you from Rome, and there again you have Caesar's tomb, the Vestal Virgin's temple, and all the rubble, like Bert says, had its significance back in those days. Wouldn't Miss Temple love this?
This, of course, is a silhouette of the statue of Julius Caesar. Nani just was crazy about taking this picture so we could send it to Miss Temple.
This is the Appian Way, which is the, I don't know, Via Appia. Read about it in our first lessons of Latin, and this is it.
We used this to go out to the
Catacombs.
catacombs, that's right. This was on our way back from the catacombs. It's one of the gates of Rome, and it's the one that the Appian Way goes through. We're through with Rome now.
This is a pair of white oxen that we saw about 50 miles out of Rome. We woke up that morning and started driving along, and there were farms on both sides of the roads, and this is the scene, very typical. These are more white oxen. You can see those white dots down there. Also notice the newly plowed ground. Everything's so green and brown and fertile looking. And of course everyone seems to be busy with the ground.
This
Now,
is a, excuse me, this is an old castle that has been turned into a bar and a clubhouse.
Now this is just near Florence, and it's an American cemetery here dedicated to the war dead of the
First World War.
First World War.
They have them all over Italy and France and in England. And the two buildings at the very front are reception offices, and inside they're all air conditioned, and they tell the story of the war memorials, the war cemeteries, and of each one in each country. It's a beautiful spot.
This is in Venice now, and we're on a bus, so to speak, and we're on our way to San Marcos Square. However, before we got there, we passed many bridges, and this is just one.
This is the most famous bridge, I believe. It's on the Grand Canal.
What's the name of it?
The Piazza Grassi is the name of this one. Another bridge on the canal. This is called the Ponte di Rialto. Along each side of the canal are palaces where the richer people used to live, and further back on the side canals are where the poorer people would live.
These are my barber poles. And this is just showing one of the fronts of one of the palaces along the Grand Canal, and you can see how the water goes right up to the front steps.
This is another, just the same. They all have different painted barber poles, and of course each palace has their own private motorboat in front that they use as a car. There are no streets in Venice. You either walk or you go by boat. Directly ahead now is the most famous palace. It's called the Chiesa della Salute, whatever that means, and it is the largest palace in Venice. This is a side street, just as we would have a side street. However, you have to use a boat.
This is another side street, and this just shows a bit closer view of it. That's Bert and I standing on the bridge that crosses over the street. You can see gondolas down in the foreground.
We finally reached our destination. This is San Marco Square, or Piazza San Marco as the Italians call it. This is the center of Venice, I believe. Now this is on our way to San Marco Island? Murano Island, where they make the Venetian glass. And on your way out there you pass this St. Michel's graveyard. And I believe this whole little island consists of graves.
This is another one of my fountains. Bert thought I was real crazy to take this, but it was about the oddest fountain that we saw, and we saw plenty of them. This is in Padua, and we had to go through Padua twice because think of a T with Padua being, or Venice being at the bottom of the T, and Padua being up at the top of the T. We had to go through Padua to get to Venice, and then in order to get to Milano, we had to go through Padua again. This is my honey again, always working. This is on Lake Garda, and we went out for a bit of a row.
The lake was beautiful and blue and nice and warm, so I decided to take a swim while we were out in the center. It was really nice. I got tired though, so I put her to work too. You notice in the background is the Italian Alps, some of the mountains.
I decided to take this picture because it was the first we did see of the Italian Alps. However, you just can't seem to get pictures of mountains. I mean, you can't get a picture of the Rockies, really, the way you see it in real life, and the same with these mountains. To us, they were, when we saw them, they were beautiful. They had snow up at the top of them and just...
Really majestic looking.
Yes, very majestic. And however, this picture does show the blue of Lake Garda, which was well worth it.
Oh no, another fountain.
This is that beautiful fountain in Brescia that I told you about. We passed by this about 4 times, I think, and just as beautiful each time.
We're in Switzerland now. This is Bellinzona, Swiss, the town at the very fork of the mountains there.
More waterfalls.
Well, now this was a pretty waterfall, you got to admit.
Yeah, I saw my fountains.
Yeah, we took 3 pictures of this at 3 stages. This is the bottom of it. You could drive through the bottom, come out on the other side, and then we took another picture from the other side. This is halfway up the waterfall now.
And this is the top.
This is another waterfall that was shooting out from the edge of the mountain, and it looked from the road as though it shot out a good 30-40 feet before falling in some places.
Notice again how green everything is. They'd had a snowfall here about 3 or 4 days before we got there. This is one of the reasons we couldn't go through the passes. We're very disappointed about that.
This is Arlo. Now this is the beginning of the Goddard Pass, We took this about halfway up the pass, or a portion of the way up the pass, and we passed a sign laying down in the road. We thought we'd stop and look at it, and it said that the pass was closed, and it's a good thing we looked at it. So we had to drive back down the mountain to the railroad, which you can see on the right lower part of the picture, and we took the train through the mountain, which was about a 15-20 minute ride. But this was about actually the highest that we got in the Alps, and the only real picture we took looking down. This is the way we saw most of the Alps in Switzerland, was from the bottom. Unfortunately, like she said, it snowed just a couple of days before we got there, and all the passes were closed.
You see on the, well, it was sort of in the middle at the bottom, you see the wood piled there. Well, this is a very small example of these piles of wood, but if you've ever seen them, it's quite something. It looks like someone has stacked logs up and then all together have sawed them off right at the end because there's not a log out of place. And this is my picture. I was convinced this was the Matterhorn, but Bert swears it isn't.
I think the Matterhorn's in Austria. This is a church in the village of Kurost in Switzerland. It's very typical of the churches you find in Switzerland, and we thought it made a very nice picture.
This is the picture mainly of a canal going into Lake Lucerne. You see how straight it goes? Well, we were up on a mountain, as you can see, and
that's my honey.
And that's me. See how green the valley is? Now this is a typical Swiss chalet, and are they beautiful? They just, you remember those music boxes that we sent last Christmas? Well, they're just exactly like that. And I think that you can even see rocks up on top of that roof. Look.
Yes.
I think you can. I never noticed that before. But they're so ornate. Yes, go ahead.
Everything in their yard is neat and in place. There's nothing weeded, and everything is really clean, painted. All over Switzerland it's like this. We decided on our way out of Switzerland that we had a couple days left, and we turned around and came back toward Interlaken to spend a few more days because it was so clean and nice, and the people really seemed intelligent.
Quite a change from Italy and Spain.
This is just a small village. It's about the size of the roads going through the villages in Switzerland. On the right there it says Bonneteria. We were just discussing whether that was a hat shop or a bakery. We couldn't make up our minds.
This was Lake Lucerne, up against the mountains. The mountains and the lake are just about the same color, or it might be a reflection in it. But this was on one side of it, up above, just before we got there.
We drove around the lake, and we parked right here and slept for about an hour. And when I woke up, I saw the fellow in the boat out there, and it looked like worth taking another picture.
Now this one was the first picture we took after our light meter was broken. And actually, I think it probably turned out better than any of the other ones.
This is Interlaken, the city of Interlaken, and we're coming down a tram car from from a hotel. I imagine the tram car took you 300 or 400 feet up.
This was a sunset just outside of Volendam. We had just been sailing for 3 hours on the Zuiderzee, which confidentially, is no longer the Zuiderzee, but the Isselmeer, because they're making a mere or a lake out of it.
In case you haven't guessed, it's Holland now. This is the same sunset. I thought this would make a nice picture with the windmill in front of the sun, with the arms had been taken off, I guess.
And you can see the one or two of the many, many, many canals that you find there. All water, 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 and it's all clean. It's not like Venice. Venice is dirty, but this is really nice. This is in Volendam itself. If you remember my saying in the diary, they wore their native costume here, which they do and which you can see there. Not everyone wears it, but most of the women do. They have dark-colored shawls over dark-colored dresses with dark-colored hats and their white aprons. However, they aren't white. They're white background with a blue and red, very fine pinstripe in them.
I think this is something like a 17th century costume. And of course the roofs are very typical of Holland also.
And you can see where those people are standing, you can see the cobblestone road. Well, that's actually the top of a dike. On the right-hand side is the harbor and the sea, the Zuiderzee. On the left-hand side, you see the houses are below the road, which means they are about 10 feet below sea level.
Now this fellow was quite happy to pose for us so we could have his picture. And they actually do wear wooden shoes. Kids wear them riding bicycles, men wear them working, women wear them walking in the streets. And this is the clothes that they wear, the large black pants, a big belt with the, the crown that they use for a buckle, that very shiny bit there, and his black jersey.
And now they don't only wear wooden shoes in Volendam, they wear them all over Holland, mostly for working. I mean, where our men would wear boondockers or heavy boots, they wear their wooden shoes.
We're in Amsterdam now. This is Rembrandt's statue, and I think it was Rembrandt Park.
Now this is my little contribution. We had stopped in Den Haag for some ice cream. We'd stopped an ice cream truck, and while Bert was getting some ice cream for us, I took this picture of I don't even know what it is, a memorial to something, I imagine, but I just like the shape of it.
The whole city seemed to be parks like this, lots of green grass, lots of trees, and statues here and there. Yes, this is the Atomium. We're in Brussels, the World Fair.
You can see those dark clouds, however, that's not really our excuse for a dark picture, but you can get some idea anyway.
By now, of course, we weren't using our light meter. It wasn't working at all. We were a little hesitant of taking pictures at all, but we figured that if we didn't, we wouldn't get a chance again. We took a few of the fair. We wished we had taken more now. This is the entrance to the fair, looking from the inside, and some more fountains.
That's the Belgium exhibition that you see there.
This is self-explanatory, of course.
And you can see the windows in the balls of the Atomium. Well, those are observation windows, and elevators and escalators and stairs go up through the connecting arms of the Atomium. And the first night that we were there, we went up to the very top ball, and it was just beautiful. It was dark by that time, so we had a really beautiful view of the fair at night.
And at night they have these balls lit in such a way that they actually sparkle, and reflecting against the aluminum, it really makes a beautiful picture. Now this was the Dutch exhibition. It's showing how with this circular, what would you call it?
Treadmill-like thing.
Treadmill, how they take the water up out of the canals and over the dike into the sea. On the other side of that dike that the people are walking on, they had a wave machine which was actually throwing waves against the dike. And they used these. They had another exhibition of making waves, showing how they tested the strength of the waves, the consistency, and just how much damage it would make to a dike. And I think that the Dutch are really experts in dikes.
As my boyfriend, our feet were getting tired, so we sat down below this fella, and I decided to take a picture of him. This was leading up, he was sort of guarding the entrance to the Belgian royal family's palace.
Well, it's over now. We're on the ferry home. That's France in the background, and that's red on the boat. This is the harbor of Calais just as we're leaving it. The trip across the channel was about an hour and 20 minutes long, and this is our first sight of the White Cliffs of Dover. As we got almost into port, I took another picture of them. You can see a little bit better why they're called the White Cliffs of Dover. They sure were a welcome sight,
there's
too.
There's a bluebird.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Well, that completes the Continental tour, and thanks so much for watching. And I hope you enjoyed them as much as we enjoyed taking them and living them. It was a wonderful trip. A month was enough, but gave us so many memories that we'll have them for years and years and years to come. Thank you very much.